FlutterFlow just added a little known feature that's a lot more powerful than people realize. I don't say this often, but this little known feature has completely changed my workflow to accomplish more in less time and having more fun doing it. And so in today's video, I'm going to be showing you exactly what that new feature is and how to use it to become a lot more productive and to build, better apps in less time. Now, before we get started, as always, all the apps that I discuss on this channel, you'll be able to view them and or clone them by becoming a member of our amazing Patreon community, and you can learn more about it via the first link in the description below the video. Now, here I am in FlutterFlow, and I have a very, very simple project here, okay? I'm just creating a grid. I just have some data from app state. I have a couple of things. Everything is very, very standard. Now, if I click on this custom code tab here, okay, and I'm on the screen, you're going to see a little button here, a little lesser known button. You may not even have noticed this button before, but this button does a lot. And if you hover over, you can see that it says open in VS Code. And this button is simply magical because it completely changes the game and allows you to build amazing apps a lot quicker, as I'm going to be showing you. But before I show you how this button works, it's important for you to do a couple of things. The first thing that I recommend is to quickly kind of scan through this documentation here, okay? This is what the name of this whole thing is. This is a FlutterFlow Visual Studio extension. And you can simply Google and you're going to end up on FlutterFlow docs here, their official documentation. And you can kind of read more about it here, okay? This is something that I highly recommend. But the next thing that you want to do is, if you don't yet have Visual Studio Code on your computer, and chances are you don't because this is an app that you can view code with, and we typically use FlutterFlow for that. But still, it's very, very important that you Google for Visual Studio Code and click here, and you can download it. I have a Mac OS, and so it's showing me this button. But if you have any other platform, you can just simply click here, other platforms. You can download it for Windows, for Linux, for different Mac versions. It's a standard, right? It's an industry standard, IDE, which stands for Integrated Development Environment, okay? So once you have that downloaded, right, what you can do now is you can click this button, and when you click it, you're going to see a message something like this. It may differ on your screen, but this is what I see. And here you want to click on Allow. And when you do that, it's going to go ahead and open Visual Studio Code for you. And the first thing that it's asking you to do is install this extension if you don't yet have it, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and click here, and that's going to go ahead and install this special extension for me, okay? Once it installs this extension for me, it downloads my project onto my hard drive, okay? And it's also asking me if I need to, install this. I don't need to do it because I already have it. But if you're doing this for the very, very first time, you want to click on yes and install Flutter SDK, okay? SDK stands for Software Development Kit. And FlutterFlow essentially generates Flutter, which is the framework that we use to build these apps. And so at the end of the day, the app that you're building with FlutterFlow, all it is, nothing more, nothing less, is basically generated Flutter code. And so I'm going to hit no here. And then it's basically setting up my app over here. Okay, so now my project is initialized. It's also asking me this, and you just want to say yes. It's very, very important. Now our FlutterFlow project is initialized. And at this point, we have essentially downloaded this project. We have pulled it onto our computer, okay? And as you can see down here, we have a couple of options, right? We can push the FlutterFlow, we can pull the latest, and we also have the project ID over here because it knows where I click this button. Because I clicked it here, it knows the project ID. Now, at some point, it may also ask you to configure your API key. Now, I already did that before, but if it asks you to do it, you can simply exit out, click here, and you can click here on your plan here, and you have this API token here. And so you can quickly view it, or you can simply copy it and paste it in Visual Studio Code during the setup process. When you give it the token, it's able to connect and kind of do all this magic for you. And so this setup process is something that you have to do only once. Later on, it's going to go ahead and download different apps that you're working with, right? So I have here a project for this app that I'm working on. If I create a new project and I go here again and I click this button, it's going to go ahead and download it and set up a brand new project for me. And this is extremely amazing because it opens up so many other possibilities. Now, before I show you some of the amazing things that you can do with this setup here, the first thing I want to show you is the code for the app that you've just downloaded. And so if you expand this lib directory, you're going to be seeing all the code for the app that you've been working on in FlutterFlow, right? In our case, this is a very simple app, but who knows? Maybe this is going to become a much more complex app throughout the process. Okay. But the key here is that if you go into this custom code directory and you have actions and widgets here, you can expand that. And this is where you're going to be seeing custom code, because typically when you're building an app with FlutterFlow, you're not going to be modifying all the code, right? That's why we have this UI builder, but you are going to be creating custom code, and this custom code is going to be either custom functions, custom widgets, or custom actions, right? That is really the parts that you're going to be modifying yourself. Now, in my case, I do not have any custom code, right? I have 0 custom functions, I have 0 custom widgets, and I have 0 custom actions. And so if you take a look here, you can see that I have nothing here. I just have an index, it's empty. I just have another index, it is empty. And so while I don't have any custom code, I still have this whole app on my computer. And that is still very useful, because guess what? I can run it in a simulator. And while you can test out your app by running it here and making sure everything works, it's super important that you test your apps in the simulators as well. And so if I go back to Visual Studio Code, guess what? I can simply click over here and I have a bunch of simulators here. Okay, so in my case, I have a physical device because I own an iPhone, but I also have these simulators. I have an iOS simulator, I have a Pixel, this simulator. And so let's say I want to test my app in an Android simulator. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click here, and that's going to go ahead and launch a simulator instance. Okay, so at this point, we're not running the app just yet. We're simply starting up a simulated instance. Now, a simulator is pretty much identical to a real app, even if I don't own an Android. You know, if I build my app and test it on this Android simulator here, I am 99.9% there, right? I mean, it's obviously still a good idea to test it on a physical device, but I have this high assurance, high confidence that this app that I'm building is going to run on a simulator, right? And I've been telling you guys this for many times. And so super important. And so now that I have this app here, simply by clicking that button, right, without even having custom code or anything, I can test my app on the simulator. And so with the simulator selected here, when I run it, it's going to automatically run it on the simulator. So let me go ahead and do that right now, just to show you how my app runs on an Android simulator. All right, so there's my app running on a simulator. Okay, and this is a simple app. We just have a list of cities with city name and city state. We just have a data type. We have a list of that, and I'm just displaying them in the grid. Super simple. Now, I can obviously work with my app here, right? So, if I am looking at my app, I have my pages here, and I have one page, right? Because if I go over here, I just have this home page. So if I see, these pages, I just have one page. I have a model, I have a widget. So this right here is the main page. So I can change things around, right? So let me see. So this is a city item name. This is city item text. And I can change the font size of, this. And so I can click here and I can say I want it to be 20. So I'm going to say 20. And guess what? just by saving it, it updates it, right? So take a look at this. This is really, really cool. So if I come over here and I say 30, I save it and it automatically updates it, right? So the big benefit here that I want to kind of underline here and emphasize is the fact that if you're making small changes or big changes, doesn't really matter. You know, your testing cycle is lightning fast. It's a lot faster than doing it on FlutterFlow itself. Okay, FlutterFlow is very fast as well, but this is even faster. And so if I come over here and I want to change it to 40, I change it, hit save, and it updates it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and change it back to 20. And now it's back to 20. I can do the same thing for the state as well. So here I don't have font size. I'm going to put font size. And another benefit is this autocomplete. Okay, so it knows what I'm typing. And so I can say I want font size, I don't know, 14. Okay, so there's 14. And let's say I want font size 20. And there's 20. It's a little bit bigger. And I can also, you know, change a couple of other things. So the main part is that it's very fast, right? This does require a little bit of coding, right? You kind of need to know what you're doing, but it's a lot easier than you may think. So if you need to do some minor changes or bigger changes, it's lightning fast. Now, things get a lot interesting when you actually have some custom code that is part of a more complex or a bigger production ready app. And so let's say I want to create a function that's going to capitalize all my city names. Okay. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say, I want to create a new function and I'm going to say capitalize city names. Okay. And this is going to be a fairly simple function, right? It's going to return a list of cities, right? So I'm going to say, well, I wanted to return a list of data type. I'm going to say data type is a list and city type. And city type is just a complex type that I have defined. I'm going to show you in a second that contains the name and the state of the city that we're dealing with. Okay. Now for the arguments, we want the same thing. We're going to pass in a list of city type, list of cities, and we are going to capitalize them, right? So over here, I'm going to say, I'm going to accept city list as well. This is going to be is list and the type is city type. All right. So we've defined our function. Next, I can go into Copilot and simply ask it to create a function. So I can say, given a list of city type, return a capitalized cities, name should be capitalized. Okay. Let's go ahead and see if this works. We're going to go ahead and run it. Okay. So this is my function and it actually looks like it's doing exactly what we needed to do. I actually realized this code assistant is extremely accurate provided that you create the right function in this function code. So we're going to copy this and we're going to paste it in here. Okay. So now we have this. I can hit save now and we have created a custom function here. Okay. I still need to check for errors over here. We're going to quickly check for errors. Should be no issues there. It's a very, very simple function here. Okay, so it went ahead, compiled it. Everything is okay. So now we can use this function. And so now I can come back over here and I can open this up and I have this grid view that's feeding the city item. And the city item is the city type, which is just a custom data type with a name and state, right? So we can store a couple of fields, not just the name of the city. And if I go into my app state, you can see that I have the city item and I have a bunch of cities that I have defined: San Diego, California, Miami, Florida, San Francisco, CA, Chicago, Illinois, Austin, Texas. Okay, so I just have a list of cities and these cities are not capitalized. And so now what I'm going to do is, instead of feeding them the raw app state, I'm going to go ahead and first capitalize those cities and then feed them here. Okay, so I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go into my custom functions. I'm going to say capitalize. And then as an argument, I'm going to feed my app state here. Okay. And so now that's all I need to do. So the result is going to be this capitalized list of cities. Okay. So now I have a custom function. I have all of this and I made a couple of changes, right? I've added some, a little bit of custom code, a little bit of jazz to my app to make it a little bit more interesting. And so the next thing that I can do is I can run it here like I typically would. But because we have this extension happening, we have this link, I don't need to do that, right? Because all I can do is click here, pull latest, right? That's going to pull the code from FlutterFlow, right? From their servers. And it's going to put it here, right? So check this out. I'm going to click here. It's telling me, are you sure you want to pull the latest version of from FlutterFlow? Unsync local changes will be over it. Very, very important. If you made some changes here, you want to push those changes first. But because the changes that we made are not that important, right? Changing the fonts and stuff like that, we are okay with overriding it, right? So in other words, this local copy that we have here, there's nothing, we didn't really do anything here. So we're okay with kind of getting the data and overriding it with the stuff that we have, on flutterflow.com. Okay, so I'm going to say yes. And that pulls the latest code here, right? Not only pulls it, it also checks it, makes sure everything is okay. And so now you're going to be seeing this file here, custom functions. That's going to have the function here, right? And if you go to your main page, this homepage widget, you're going to be seeing it loading data from this capitalized city names. Okay, this is a little bit extra. It's not important to check it because we know that is what we did here. And so we see it being reflected here. And so now what we have here is we have all the stuff pulled successfully from FlutterFlow. So we have this version that is, it's current, right? It's completely updated with the new stuff that we had before. And so now what's interesting here is, let's say I go to this custom function. I have a custom function. And let's say I decided to do something else. I want to lowercase my city names. I don't want to capitalize them. Well, it's actually really easy. I mean, I'm seeing this custom function. It's exactly what I saw before here, right? It's exactly what we saw here. And all I need to do is I just need to change it, right? You can use ChatGPT, you can use anything that you want. But typically what you're going to do is instead of 2 uppercase, you're going to do 2. And when you start typing it, you even have code completion, right? So you know that before it was 2 uppercase, and this is a simple function. We created it ourselves, so it's not that hard to figure out. So all we need to do is delete that, put the period, and now we have all of this nice auto completion that you get for free in Visual Studio Code. That is something that you get for free. And so now I can simply type 2 lowercase. Now a quick point here. That is something that's available here in FlutterFlow as well. So if I go over here and I press this, it's available here. But this editing screen, right? The way it edits here with the completion is so flaky that a lot of times in my experience, this is not going to be working. So for instance, right now, this is a check mark, but a lot of times, like this is something else. And you might be seeing like this, this red squiggly lines is what I call them, because typically what's going to happen is this is not going to work. And all of this, like a lot of your code is going to be in red squiggly lines. And you're going to be thinking to yourself, oh my God, is something wrong with my custom code? When in reality, this is not working. This editor is not working because this editor is supposed to work similarly to Visual Studio Code, but sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I guarantee you 100% that if I keep working on this and I put more stuff and more stuff, at some point it's just going to give up. And there's nothing that you can do that to fix it. And so here, yeah, you can fix it. You can put 2 lowercase. It works right now, but I guarantee you're going to be experiencing this red squiggly line of hell at one point or another. You've probably even seen it in my videos, and I told you guys, do not worry about that. That is not an issue. It still works. But if you're working here, you're never going to have this problem, right? Because this is going to work all the time. And so now all I need to do is hit save. It's going to do a hot reload, and let's take a look at our app, and it's all lowercase. Now, there's another important thing that we need to do. Because we've modified the app here, we need to make sure that we upload it here because, well, we made the change manually, but remember, this was to uppercase. Okay, so now you don't need to save it because we've reverted it to how it was before. And so the next thing that we need to do, we need to make sure we save it, and we need to click on push to FlutterFlow. So I'm going to do that. It's syncing with FlutterFlow. You need to wait, and it says push to FlutterFlow completed. And so now, if you exit out and you come back here, it says 2 lowercase, right? Because it reloaded the code that we've just updated. And there's the problem. You see this? You see this squiggly line, hell, right? This is exactly what I was talking about. Now it's giving us errors. Why is it giving us errors? It should not be giving us errors. Well, it's telling us custom functions need to be checked for errors. This is fine because we've modified it. So let me go ahead and run it. But even if you do that, that's not going to fix this issue because I do see it a lot. I would say like 50% of the time it works, 50% it does not work. And so this is very, very confusing. And so you're not even sure if everything works or not. It does compile correctly. This is a code analyzer is up and running, but we have all of this when we shouldn't see that. But in Visual Studio Code, you're never going to see that, right? You're never going to see red lines. You may see, you may see some yellow lines, and that's fine. You can ignore those. Those are just suggestions. But you're never going to see red lines unless there's a problem, right? So if I do something like this, you're going to see a red line because there's no such thing as this function that I typed. But if I remove that, everything is fine now, okay? And so that is another big benefit of working in Visual Studio Code instead of working in FlutterFlow's built-in code editor here, because it's flaky, right? It's a great tool. It's amazing. I spent many, many hours working here, but at the end of the day, it does fail a lot more than I would have liked. And so it works a lot better here. Now, obviously, when you see all that, your auto-completion might not work, right? Because now if I hover over here, it's telling me invalid type. And so let's try auto-completion now. Let's see if it's going to work. And now it doesn't work, right? So if I press period, it doesn't know what to do because it's not recognizing this name, right? It's telling me name can't be unconditionally accessed because the receiver can be null, right? So I'm getting a lot of errors and I can't really function, right? And so even though this is supposed to have auto-completion, which is amazing, it's a big time saver, a lot of times it's just not going to work, right? So let me go ahead and undo that. Now it's back to 2 lowercase, okay? Whereas here, it's always going to work, right? So I can just remove that. I can press type. I can put a period now, and I'll put the length. I can make name the length of name, which is something that you probably don't want to do. I can do 2 lowercase, 2 string, 2 uppercase. I can trim it. I can trim left, trim right, right? I can do all of these things. So I can put it back to uppercase there. And now it's telling us that we have an issue here, right? So it's telling us expected to find this. And so I need to put a comma, right? Because these two things need to have a comma because this is, I'm returning arguments basically, right? And, you can do this yourself, right? You can, use this auto-completion here that you get for free. You can also use something like ChatGPT or your favorite LLM to spit out this code for you. You can simply take all of this here, copy it, paste it into ChatGPT and get this code. And then you can simply save it and you're going to be seeing this updated here. And so when it comes to custom code, you want to be working in Visual Studio Code instead of FlutterFlow. That is something that I prefer. And to show you what else you can do, well, let's go ahead and create a custom widget. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to create a very, very simple widget. So I'm just going to copy this. And you see, once I copy it, I'm getting a bunch of errors. And these should not be errors, right? These should not be errors because if I save it and I compile it, it's going to compile just fine, right? This is a problem with this editor, right? So now it's obviously telling me that, custom widgets have not been compiled. Let's go ahead and compile it so that you can see that everything is okay. And I know that everything is okay, right? And so a quick note here is while I'm waiting, I realized that a lot of times it takes a while to compile. This is a very, very simple widget. And this is something that you don't really need to do in Visual Studio Code, right? Because it's instant. It does it automatically. And so let's wait for this to finish. All right, so it finished compiling. It took a little bit longer than I expected, and really a little bit longer than necessary. But this is what we see here, right? Everything is fine, but we still see all of this red squiggly widgets when they should really be there because everything is fine. All right, and so we have this custom widget. I'm going to go back to Visual Studio Code over here, and I'm going to pull latest. Okay, we're going to overwrite That's fine because we have this source of truth right here, right on our local PC because we're testing this custom stuff. So I'm going to say yes. And now it's going to download the code and we're going to be seeing this new custom widget over here. Okay. This is our new custom widget. And as you can see in Visual Studio Code, it looks great. There are no, red squiggly lines, red squiggly underlines because it's fine. There's no errors, right? If I type something like this, yeah, it's going to give us an error. If I do something like this, it's going to give us an error. But as is, there are no errors. There's no issues. And so now I can run it. I can simply save it and I have my app. But because we're not using this custom widget, we're not seeing anything. And so let me make a couple of other changes. Let's say I want to display a text widget, okay? And in fact, now it's kind of doing it. It's doing this autocomplete here, but it's not going to be as effective because there's a lot of issues here. So let's say I think this is how you do it. I may forget. Let's go ahead and save it. Let's see if that works. Let's go ahead and compile it. And so when I try to compile it, I get an error. So it's telling me too many, it's telling me that I have an error. And that is because I'm not quite sure how to do it. And so here it's going to be a lot easier, right? So if I put child, it gives me this autocomplete and I put text and then I do this and it's letting me to fill it in, right? So there's this data here and that's going to be the string and I put sample text. Okay. And now I just have some suggestions, right? Unnecessary instance of container. Well, I want the container. And then text, it wants me to make a couple of changes. And that's actually really easy, right? So all I need to do is hover over, scroll down, do a quick fix, and choose one of these options here. So I'm going to choose this, hover over, scroll down, quick fix, remove it. Okay. And in fact, I don't want to remove it. I want the container there. Okay. And so now we have a custom widget. Okay. So I'm going to hit save. It's still not being displayed because we're not displaying it. And I can do it here, but the best way to do it would be to do it in FlutterFlow because that's no longer custom code. We're working with pages. And so I'm going to push this to FlutterFlow. Okay. That's going to push this custom code. As soon as we're done with custom code, you want to push it back to FlutterFlow because if you're working with like standard stuff, you don't want to mess with it here, right? Because you're going to create a bunch of problems. And so now if I come over here, I go back here, you see how now it's completely set up. And so now what I can do is I can come over here and I can go to my column and I can display this custom widget. Okay. I'm going to put 100% and a height 300 or maybe 200, something like that. And what do we have? Height not specified. We have errors. No, let's check our errors. Let's go ahead and compile that because that was an error from before. It didn't automatically recompile once we push the changes back. That should work fine. And so now I've compiled it. Everything is fine. There's no issues. I don't have any errors or anything like that. And now we can actually see this widget here. It's displaying the sample text, which is absolutely correct. But really, the reality was it would have been a lot faster if I would have done it here, right? So as soon as I made the changes that have nothing to do with custom code, I want to go ahead and I want to pull the latest. Okay, I'm going to pull the latest, which includes displaying the widget. And now it's displaying this custom widget, which is this thing over here. It's a lot quicker. It's just, it's so much quicker because this takes time. And even if you do not compile them, and you do need to compile them if you have errors, but if it's telling you to compile, you may not need to compile. You can simply run this. And even if you run this here, it's still going to be longer than working with the custom code here. Now, a couple of other things that I can do is I can right click this. I can click on refactor and I can, change this. I can wrap with center, with a bunch of other widgets here. But really, what you want to be doing here is you want to be, using AI or something else to create these custom widgets right inside of Visual Studio Code. And so let's say I take all of this and I copy it into ChatGPT and I say, change my custom widget to display a grid with a container and a text inside that says grid text. Okay, we're gonna do that. That's gonna go ahead and create an updated custom widget for me. Okay, so there we go. I can simply copy that, paste this over here, and right away I can see if we have any errors. And we don't have any errors because you would have seen squiggly lines and you would have seen stuff on this right hand side, right? So if I do something like this, we have a squiggly error and we have this red icon. So that means if you're here, you don't see it, but you know it's there because this is red, all of this is red, and you see this red here. So all you need to do is scroll up to that position, come back here, delete it, fix it somehow. And now if I save this, it's going to do a hot reload. And now we have our new ChatGPT generated custom widget, which is just a grid with a bunch of these things, right? Very, very simple. And this is going to be a lot faster when you're dealing with custom code than working with it in FlutterFlow. And so now what I can do is I can push all of that to FlutterFlow. And now once I push the changes back to FlutterFlow, I can run this app like I typically do. I don't need to do that because I already ran it in a simulator, which is a lot more reliable, but I can still run it here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and run it here and see how it looks in the FlutterFlow test environment. There's our app with all the changes, with all the custom stuff that we entirely did all of this in Visual Studio Code. Now, generating this custom code and stuff like ChatGPT, copying and pasting can get fairly tedious. There's actually a lot of other things that you can do that allow you to build this app right here using new AI tools. But that is an entirely separate video. And so if you guys want to see that workflow, which is truly amazing, leave a comment below and let me know that you want to see that video, because that's going to, just change your perspective on how to create all of this custom code. And so when it comes to custom code, custom functions, custom widgets, custom actions, regardless of how simple or complex it is, it's a lot easier to do it in Visual Studio Code. It's just going to be a lot faster. You can, test your changes quicker. You can make changes quicker. You can see how they are. You can test them in a simulator. And that once you're done, once you're finished with custom code, you can simply send all of that back to FlutterFlow and work on the non-custom stuff. And so as far as I'm concerned, for me personally, this is an absolute game changer, because previously it was just a pain in the neck. It was just slow. It was difficult. You would have these red squiggly lines all the time. You weren't sure if there are errors or no errors, if things are going to work or, things are not going to work. But with this method, you get the best of both worlds, right? You can focus on the standard stuff using the FlutterFlow UI, the FlutterFlow app builder, while dealing with the custom stuff using the tools and the apps that are designed to excel with code, right? Because custom code is really just code, and it's a lot easier to work with custom code inside of Visual Studio. And so I highly, highly recommend this approach. I know this is something that I'm going to be doing from now on for all my apps that use custom code. Now, if you guys enjoyed this video, then you're going to absolutely enjoy our amazing Patreon community, because when you become a member, you're going to gain access to the resources that I cover in my videos. So things like apps, different workflows, different ideas, all of that is inside my Patreon community. So for instance, when you become a member, you'll be able to view and or clone this app right here. So you're going to gain all the code. You're going to gain this entire app. You're going to gain the link. And that means you can go through the motions and see how things work, right? You can clone this app, set up Visual Studio, and try to repeat the things that I demonstrated in this video. And when you become a member of our amazing Patreon community, you're not only going to get access to this app, you're going to gain access to pretty much all my apps. They're all there, different widgets, different apps, from simple to intermediate to more complex. Every single app is there. And it goes without saying that you can also interact with other members of our amazing community. I'm there. Everybody's there. If you have any questions, if you have any issues, we'll be glad to help you out. And so if that sounds like something that you may be interested in, click the first link in the description below the video and join our amazing Patreon community.